Tight budgets mean tough choices. And as public schools in Ontario adjust to new funding priorities, they may soon be looking for more outside help. That is, private sector help through partnerships with corporations that can bring technology or expertise not otherwise affordable. Sounds like a win-win equation. Is it? Let's find out more with Balaji Ganapathy. He is head of workforce effectiveness at Tata Consultancy Services. Kelly Gallagher Mackay, assistant professor in the Faculty of Liberal Arts, the Law and Society program at Wilfrid Laurier University. Sunil Johal, policy director at the Mowat Centre, which is now associated with the Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy at U of T. And John Chasty, Toronto District School Board Superintendent of Student Voice, Parent and Community Engagement and Wellbeing. Good to have everybody here at TVO. We got you've here once before. You've been here 8 times before. You're practically co-hosting with me. And you two for the first time. Nice to have you here. Balaji, I want to spend the first few minutes with you just so we can understand what it is that your organization is doing and what TCS, Tata Consultancy Services, is about. So let's start there. What do you guys do?
So TCS is an information technology company. We were founded in 1968, so this is our 50th year with $20 billion of revenue and 420,000 employees globally. We've been in the Canadian market for many decades now, work with more than 100 customers across all industries. And basically, we are in the business of helping customers on a growth and transformation journey using digital technologies.
Is the Tata the same guy who owns the steel businesses and all of that? And the cars and everything?
It is part of the Tata group of companies, which is the 100 billion conglomerate that owns steel to software.
Okay. You have a relationship with the Toronto District School Board, yes?
That is right.
Tell us about the nature of that.
So it is a very deep partnership that has been forming and growing over the last 5 years. We started working with the Toronto District School Board, in fact, having discussions with them in 2012. And over a period of a year, we created the design together of a program that was launched in 2014. And so this past May, we just celebrated the 5th year of our partnership.
Let's look at a few pictures here, and you can take us through these and show us what we're seeing, starting with this young person here with some kind of gizmo in front of them. What's going on here?
So this is a student from a Toronto District School Board demonstrating how to use robotics to solve a problem that was presented to him. He and his team of fellow students from his class learned coding and programming through the GoIT program, which is the partnership that we have with the Toronto District School Board.
It's on all their shirts there, I see GoIT.
Yeah, so GoIT is an experiential learning program that TCS created in 2009 and brought to Toronto in partnership with the TDSB in 2014. So what the student is doing here is just the final part of the learning exercise where they demonstrate what they have learned by combining together in teams and working on a challenge that has been presented to them.
Okay, let's do another picture, Sheldon, if you would. Okay, what's happening here?
So this is a wireframe for an app that students have developed. So one of the fundamental elements of GoIT is using empathy to identify a problem that students face in society, and then they use design thinking to come up with a solution to that. And then they learn the basics of prototyping and wireframing so that they can convert their ideas and solutions into an app.
Okay.
And this is a group of students who have created an app called Upgrade, which is basically to help themselves and their peers be at level or above grade level in terms of their learning needs.
Let's do one more picture.
And this is an exciting one because these are the students who won the GoIT Tech Summit, which we host as the culmination of every year of the partnership. And the ribbons represent how they integrated the sustainable development goals and challenges that society faces into their solution.
Okay. Let's just understand better the nature of this relationship, in as much as I understand what the school board and the students get out of it. They have access to this expertise and experiences that they might not otherwise have. What does your company get out of it?
I think we are a purpose-driven organization, being part of the Tata Group, which is a 150-year-old company. So we believe that organizations have a key role to play in society, which is not just in economics development, but also social development and cultural development. And in order to contribute to that, education is a key pillar that companies can partner and collaborate with the education system. It is even more imminent today because the pace at which technologies are disrupting economies and society means that it is not just a business obligation but a moral responsibility for companies to help make sense of that and translate that into what the education system can do to keep pace with the changing needs.
Okay, I understand all that, but you're a private sector company. You want to make money too, right?
Absolutely,
okay.
We do.
Do you hire people in Ontario?
Yes. In fact, we are one of the top employers hiring information technology workers in Canada.
So, because you mentioned 400,000 plus worldwide, any sense of how many in the province of Ontario you might have hired?
In the last 2-3 years, we have hired more than 1,500 people in Canada.
1,400?
1,500.
Okay. John, let me get you into this conversation now. Why does this make sense for your board?
Well, I think it makes sense for our board. What drives what goes on in terms of school improvement in our TDSB schools is a vision for learning. And one of the key elements of the vision for learning is transforming student learning in the classroom. We know and student voice is really important to us. We know from our 2017 student census that 56% of our students are not satisfied with the teaching that is going on in secondary schools. We also know that roughly 72% of our students, they're worried about their futures, and more so than their personal health, their well-being, their friends, their family. So those two pieces of data are what drive any kind of partnership that we have in terms of supporting our students. So what we see in TADA are a couple of different things. One is an opportunity to bring their volunteers, who are their full-time workforce, into schools. And I have to say that the TADA workforce, the TADA quote-unquote volunteers that come in, they very much represent the cultural diversity of our students. So there's some role modeling that is going on right away when they're working with our students in schools. So our students get to see that, and they get to talk to the volunteers, and they get to find out what did you have to do, what courses did you take, how did you get there, how long did it take you.
Can I just ask you about volunteers? Because I thought this was a private sector profit-making venture. So what do you mean volunteers?
Well, they're within TADA, and Balaji can speak to this a bit better, but his workforce, they're volunteering. He's asking who would like to come in and work with students in our schools. So they're volunteering within their context to come and support our students in schools.
You want to do a quick follow-up on that?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a completely philanthropic venture for us. This is offered free of cost to all students in schools. And 3 elements that go into it. One is content. So working along with the TDSB to create content that is aligned with the global competencies that TDSB has for their students. The second is context, trying to bring in real-world flavor and industry context so that students understand how what they learn can be applied to the world of work. And the third is connection, connecting to role models and mentors from our organization and other organizations who can give them the confidence but also the mentorship needed to guide them on how they can apply these skills.
Just to clarify, this costs the Toronto District School Board nothing?
It doesn't cost anything as far as Go IT goes. Where we do have costs are, for example, the teachers who are involved in these programs. Usually there's a day of training, so we pay the supply teacher cost for that, which is minimal relative to the scope of the project. And then at the very end of the year, and those are the photographs that you saw earlier, we hold a culminating event where students come together, teams, and there's a competition and a sharing of the work that they've done in the classroom as well, in the area of global competencies. So they can sort of show off their problem solving, collaboration, creativity, all of those different elements and what's been going on deeper in the classroom connected to the curriculum.
Okay. Kelly, let's get some feedback now from Kelly and Sunil. There are endless examples of the private sector and school boards collaborating on everything from soda pop machines in the cafeteria to, iPads in the classroom and so on and so forth. So this is another example. What do you think?
Well, I think there's a lot of appeal for students. My son participated in that program and enjoyed it a lot. But I also think there's questions we need to ask as citizens thinking about our schools as public space.
Like what?
So partnerships with companies are nothing new for schools. The Sears Drama Festival was started 75 years ago and sponsored by Simpson Sears. You know, we've had this for a long time. There seems to be some sort of shifting between what's seen as the essentials that students need to learn versus enrichment, and enrichment seems to come with an increasingly privatized flavor. And I think that's a real worry for us. I also think we need to think about what's it in it for companies long term.
Okay, well, hold off on that. You say you've got some concerns about it. What's concerning?
I mean, I'm concerned not about this particular project, but in general, the idea that schools are going to outsource how we learn about innovation and global competencies and align that completely with sort of workforce preparedness, because I think when we think of global competencies, we need to think about citizenship alongside workforce preparedness. And I'm not sure that private companies are the best place to learn that modeling. I also think it's really important that we be aware that schools, our public schools, are in fact a market for these companies. So when we think that there's Google Classroom in half of US classrooms, and that it's run out of the marketing department of Google, that should give us a little twig of alarm, both about the sort of immediate question of whether schools are buying Chromebooks or whatever kind of technology, but also about the long term. Who are we translating our students into future customers? I worry about that.
Okay, Sunil, your view on this?
I think we need to start thinking about what's the public interest ultimately here. Obviously, there's appeal for the TDSB to engage in these types of partnerships. Their budget's constrained, and we know given the provincial context, that's going to be the case going forward for a number of years. For private sector firms, there's an appeal to engage in philanthropic endeavors. But when we look at, for example, in Silicon Valley, where are the kids of the tech firm executives going? They're going to schools which don't have laptops and technology in the classrooms by and large. Yet these firms are promoting the use of that technology for all the other students in America and in other countries. So, I mean, we have to start thinking about what are the kind of, as Kelly was hinting at, what are the longer term, maybe ulterior motives of some of these firms? And I'm not speaking again to Tata specifically. I don't know the specifics of that arrangement, but is it to engage productively in society, or is it to increase the size of their workforce, given that we know that we don't have enough people in the STEM fields and we want to encourage people to do that? But that should be a public governmental decision. It shouldn't be a private sector decision nudging us in certain directions and saying, well, this is where we want kids to get more or less experience.
Well,
I think once we've made a strategic priority in the public interest as a society, then sure, let's have those partnerships and let's get that done. But the big strategic decision shouldn't be influenced really, I don't think, by the private sector.
John, you've heard some observations here. Can you comment?
Well, I think one of the things that we did is we wouldn't enter into a partnership unless we could judge whether it has an impact on our students or not. Otherwise, we wouldn't be as long with working collaboratively with Tata. So we did research for 2 years in terms of surveys to students and staff about the impact of the Go IT program. And one of the things that students told us was really powerful was an awareness of STEM careers and STEM courses that could impact on their future. And part of this program is about talking about what those jobs might be, because we're not all sure what those jobs are going to look like yet going forward in the future. But given that so many of our students are concerned about their future and they're worrying about their future, it's good to provide options. It's good to talk about the types of careers in science, technology, engineering, and math. And here, from the TCS folks, this is what I do for a living, this is how I got there, and some of that role modeling that's going on in terms of their education that they needed to get there. What the research, our research clearly showed was that students are more likely to take STEM-related courses after experiencing the Go IT program, and that their awareness of STEM careers was enhanced greatly.
So without this service being offered by Tata, you think there would be fewer people going into the sciences, the technologies, the mathematics, engineering, that type of thing?
I think this is one area, one program that is supporting that in terms of moving forward. We have other programs in the TDSB. It's not just Go IT or TCS, so I'll give you an example of that. We have 285 digital lead learners, which is close to half of our schools, our secondary and elementary schools. So these are teachers within a school put up their hand and say, I'm interested in the global competencies and supporting developing capacity of my colleagues in the school and of students in the school. We work with those 285 digital lead learners on areas of specialty, sometimes within technology, sometimes it's just related to the global competencies, and then how to go back and support. Some of the digital lead learners are involved in Go IT, but not all of them, just a very small number, and then the rest are teachers who are interested, principals and teachers who are interested in it. It fits a need within their school that they believe will support their students.
Kelly, let me suggest, as we consider the division of labor in the education system, obviously your concern about making sure that students get treated as future citizens, current and future citizens, and have an ability to contribute in that way. Can we not have sort of the regular school system do that job, whereas maybe contract out a bit of the private sector innovation piece of their education that they need as well?
Well, I think if innovation's the future, then that's the place I want to be darn sure we're having public voices speaking, and that innovation doesn't get equated with the private sector, because that seems to me really a worry. We need to solve all kinds of problems in all kinds of ways, and we need to do it as communities, and we need to make sure that, and I think this is actually a very good program in terms of making sure that all schools participate. A lot of these enrichments tend to target particular high achieving schools or this or that. So
Can I just ask if he does
I'm worried
that?
about that.
Do you do that?
Yeah, it is part of the design of the program is to listen to the student voice, the administrator voice, the parent voice.
But are you only in the hotshot schools, or are you more widespread?
No,
In
they're in
fact,
all
it
the
is
schools.
extremely widespread, and every year, starting with 10 schools in 2014 to 50 schools this year,
50.
50 schools this past school year, is to democratize access to these opportunities. Look, I understand the cynicism and where it comes from, and it has to be there so that we have an informed society that is asking business and industry to do the role that they need to perform. But we take that role very seriously and make sure that we are incorporating the feedback and meeting the education system where they are at.
In Ontario, how many different school boards are you in?
So we are working with the Toronto District School Board and the Peel District School Board, and also with Skills Ontario, so that we reach First Nations schools. We work with the nonprofit organizations like Cages, which focuses on girls.
Okay. Would you like to be all over the
Kidnetics.
place?
Absolutely.
Would this be a good thing for the Ontario school system if they were all over the place?
I mean, that's a really tricky question. I mean, I think, again, we need to think about fundamentally what's the purpose of a public education system. If, as John mentioned earlier, kids don't feel their teachers know enough about some of these issues, maybe the answer then isn't outsourcing that work to the private sector, it's investing in our teachers so that they do have those skills and they can inspire kids. And again, there's nothing wrong with bringing in people from the private sector for career days or some partnerships and saying, here's what potential career paths for you are. But my concern is the driving of the agenda by private sector firms. I have a lot of unease about that. I think if we've got gaps in terms of what public school teachers are good at, and whether that's teaching math or teaching science, we know that less than half of grade 6 students in Ontario hit the provincial standards in math in the most recent EQAO scores. Let's not outsource that function then to Google or Tata. Let's say we need to invest more in our teachers and make sure that they can teach and inspire our kids. To me, that's the better path forward.
Can I respond to that? Because that's such a good observation, and which is where the evolution of this program has gone. So this past year, John mentioned about DLLs, the digital learning leads. So what we have done along with TDSB is to provide inputs to the curriculum so that teachers can be given the professional development and training that they need to bring, as they deem fit, content of this program into their classrooms. So it is totally dependent on what the principal and the teacher feels the need is, and then based on student interest and where the gaps are, they can bring more elements of the program to their specific school, including volunteer engagement or specific mentorship opportunities. So absolutely, it has to be based on what the need is, a recognition of that, and then working along with individual schools and teachers to empower them to do what they do best.
Okay, Kelly, can I try this with you? Parents want great schools, they want great teachers, They probably want more teachers, right? They want smaller classes. They're not going to get them now, but we understand that.
They really matter, yep.
And they don't want to pay higher taxes.
Right.
Generally speaking, some people don't mind paying higher taxes. Most people don't want to pay more taxes, but
Yep.
they want improved services. Is this a legitimate response to those competing desires?
I think we do need to challenge some of those desires. When I walk past, there's a beautiful school near me, a Shaw Street Public School. It's gorgeous. It's no longer used as a school. It was built when people didn't have indoor toilets. There was a commitment to public education to move us forward as a society. I do think we need to challenge the discourse around taxes and make sure people see that there's value for money in it. I think that there's a genuine desire on the part of school systems to be trying to respond to the workforce and the desire for students and their parents that their kids get jobs. And there's something to be said for the real world experience of having an interaction with whether it's in a co-op placement or coming into the school with this kind of initiative. I think that actually is something that your teacher in the classroom can't do for herself. But we need to be careful. We need to try and challenge the sort of sexiness of the idea that this is going to be what the future looks like, is that we're going to contract out our priorities, that collaboration and innovation mean for-profit enterprise. I worry about that, and I worry about the idea that, I think we need to make sure that kids are reading 1984 alongside the time that they're working with these corporations on how do we develop the surveillance technologies of the future.
Okay, all right. When you sit down, John, at the negotiating table, maybe there are some other school superintendents watching this program right now and they're thinking, oh, I didn't know about this. I want to investigate whether or not this is appropriate for my school or for my board. So when you sit down with an organization like this that's got more than 400,000 employees all over the world and is part of a significant business empire all over the world, what do you have to be wary of?
Well, I think a couple of important things. One, it takes time. Any kind of partnership, it took us 1.5 years to have conversations and collaboratively build a program that we thought benefited our students in an appropriate way, and for TATA to say that's something that we can. It's two different organizations who have two different functions, as you brought up
two
earlier.
different cultures and two different mindsets and two different everything.
And I think that it took a long time to culture trust in that relationship. This isn't let's get together, have a meeting, boom, we've got a partnership. There's a lengthy process that goes along with that in negotiating a memorandum of understanding, and there's legal issues that are involved in that as well, from a due diligence perspective, because we're working with children, and all of those pieces. And so my advice would be that listening to each other, building that relationship, not being in a hurry. For us in the TDSB, this is not about money. There isn't money changing hands between TATA and the TDSB. What's happening is we're working in a collaborative partnership moving forward. And I think what Balaji said is really important. What he mentioned a couple minutes ago is in the first iteration of Go IT, it was the photographs that you saw earlier of sort of bring in the volunteers and do some robotics and MIT App Inventor and coding and that sort of thing. We're in the first year now of what I would consider to be the evolution of this partnership in the second phase. And it's about the volunteers directly supporting classroom teachers coming to where they are in the curriculum and the courses that they're teaching from kindergarten to grade 12. So we have kindergarten teachers involved in this. And looking at where's the curriculum, how do the global competencies fit, and where can a TCS employee benefit supporting the professional development and learning in that area with teachers.
Sunil's eyebrows are dancing here. What's going on?
I was more on board with the program, but the more I hear about it, the more concerns I'm hearing. So when I'm hearing kindergarten kids being involved in this, I'm starting to get a little more
How come?
worried. I think we don't know what the future is going to be. So Mark Cuban, the software guy, owner of the Dallas Mavericks, he said we shouldn't be teaching kids coding because guess what? In 10 years, that's all going to be automated and done by machines. So I think we don't want to have this path dependency where we think, well, what's happening now in the tech world is going to determine where the world is going to be in 10 or 15 or 20 years. Because guess what? It may well be that the kids who are reading Jane Austen and George Orwell are going to be creating those mega companies and are going to be super successful in the future. And I think if we shift too far in the direction of, well, everybody's got to learn to code, everybody's got to be doing X, Y, and Z and developing apps. That makes sense now maybe, but for a kindergarten kid who's going to be entering the labor force in 20 or 25 years, we don't know what that future is going to be. I'd be much more comfortable if the public education system, K to 12, is giving kids the fundamentals, reading, writing, etc. And then once you get to college or university, that's where we see more partnerships with the private sector. Kids can get into more applied types of learning because they're closer to the labor market at that point. We know where the careers are going to be, and they have some agency and autonomy at the age of 19, 20, 21 to determine what's good from not so good for them.
Balaji, what do you say to school boards, to parents, maybe to students who are a little skeptical about what's going on here?
I think this is totally based on what the demand has been from parents and schools, right? This is not a corporate trying to create a program to cater to its own individual needs. I think Cyril makes an important point around agency and the right time, but I think we underestimate the students. If you really look at what the capacity of the student and the teacher is, if you provide them the fundamental concepts that are important for anybody to learn in this day and age, it is computational thinking layered on top of the reading, writing, and arithmetic skills. Liberal arts and humanities and English language. So Go IT is not about coding. It is about that fundamental knowledge of computational thinking, using empathy to understand problems that you're seeing around you. And yes, we are not teaching kindergartners coding, but the element of empathy, when you express that and use a language to identify what that means, as they progress through the school system, they have more confidence that they have a fundamental knowledge of these
Let me get one last comment from Kelly here. We got about 30 seconds to go, and I want to know whether anything you've heard from these two allays some of your concerns.
No, because the concern isn't with this particular program. It's about the mindset at the system level that sees private investment as a solution to an imaginary problem with public schools. Because the other data in your survey shows that 90% of students and families are very satisfied with the schools, but you'd never guess that to read the newspaper. We have very good public schools in this province, and we need to value them as an important asset for our democracy and our future.
Okay, that's our time. Can I thank Balaji Ganapathy and Sunil Johal on the right-hand side of the table, geographically, not necessarily politically, and Kelly Gallagher Mackay and John Chasty on the left side of the table. Same admonition in place. We're grateful for all of you for coming into TVO tonight. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Steve.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.